Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for joining us this evening. You're watching a special show involving the Free Jaggi Now campaign team and Panthik organizations to talk about the breaking news that we've heard today that Jaggi has been acquitted in one of the first cases that was brought against him by the Indian state when he was abducted in November 7 years ago. We've got with us Gurpreet Singh Johal, Jaggi's brother, Dr. Prabjot Singh from California, and Deepa Singh from Sikh Youth UK, and Jazz Singh from the Sikh Federation, who will also be joining us shortly. So, as many of you know, Jagtar Singh was an internet blogger that was abducted whilst visiting India for his wedding 7 years ago. At the time when he was abducted, Indian police made numerous allegations across Indian nationalist media. At one point, the then Chief Minister of Punjab, Captain Arminder Singh, made some outrageous claims that with the arrest of Jagtar Singh, a terror module had been busted, and he went early on to say that all of the evidence is in hand, and that they're fully confident with their legal proceedings, that all the noise that was being made, referring to the campaigns to support Jaggi's innocence and his release that were taking place across the world, that all of this noise was orchestrated by Jaggi's family and a small bunch of supporters. Captain Arminder Singh and the Punjab police went on to do a press conference in those early days saying that they had sufficient evidence and would be charging Jagtar Singh imminently. 7 years later, 151 or 52 cases, and the two cases that have been brought before the courts have both resulted in dismissal. Many of us are not surprised by these events because, as the campaign for Jaggi's brother has maintained since early on, that Jagtar Singh is innocent, that he's being arbitrarily detained, and that definition of arbitrary detention was also supported by the United Nations Special Rapporteur that looked into these issues. So, if we can hear from Jagtar Singh's brother, Gurpreet Singh, about what has happened today and the significance of this acquittal, the relevance of this particular case, the Baghapurana case, and what cases remain going forward, and what the hope is for the campaign to bring Jaggi back home. Gurpreet Singh?
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ Thank you, Shamsher Singh ji. Today has been a momentum point for the Free Jaggi Now campaign. 7 years and 4 months ago, Jaggi was abducted whilst out shopping with his wife. And at the time, on the 7th of November, Captain Amrinder Singh and high-ranked police officers had said that they had all evidence for Jaggi to be a member of a conspiracy and these murders that took place. From day one, since the campaign started, the family and the campaign have maintained that Jaggi was innocent. Today, the Indian judicial system prevailed, albeit it took 7 years and 4 months for this to prevail. It's very welcomed in terms of the judge heard the full case. Just to give a bigger background to this, it took 145 trial hearings for the prosecution to try to present their case. In the 145 trial hearings, they were not able to convince the judge. It took the defence, and that's Jaggi's and the other co-accused defence, 5 hearings, out of which 2 were delays from the Indian jail authorities who did not provide the defence statements in order to present the case why there should be acquittals. The judge took 3 days in order to make a decision. Initially, we thought we might have a decision on Friday, but then we were told it was adjourned to Tuesday. So this morning, we were told it will be in the afternoon. So in UK time this morning, the judge acquitted Jaggi of all charges in the Baghapurana case. Now, why is this Baghapurana case important? Because this was the case that Jaggi was abducted on. This is where all the cases started from. And the charges that Jaggi has in the Baghapurana case and the other 8 NIA cases are identical. We have argued that Jaggi should not be charged in the NIA cases because of this ongoing case, but the Indian court system was that the burden of proof is so low that because there was no conviction or acquittal, that you had to proceed on and the charges were framed against Jaggi. So why is this case important today? Because it's proven that Captain Amrinder Singh lied, DGP Arora lied, and a number of senior officers tried to make this a political case when there was nothing out of it. And without Jaggi, there's no international conspiracy. So that's why it's been important to run the whole trial element of it. And today's outcome shows that there's no evidence against Jaggi. And what's one really important basis the way the Indians work? One of the witnesses that they had relied on alleged to have said something in his statement, but when it came to evidence, Advocate Manjpur broke him because there was nothing in the statement and what evidence he was giving that matched. And as a result, the judge found that that witness was not a credible witness at all. Why is this important? Is because you cannot be convicted multiple times on the same charges. So the rule of double jeopardy applies, which many are familiar of. This will now allow us this two-front battle. One is with the legal in India, and the other is with the UK government. So that's why it becomes important. Jaggi will not be released as a result of today's outcome, but it will give us the grounds that we require to get the other cases dropped. And we're hopeful that they would get dropped quicker, much quicker than it took this one. Jaggi's also got a pending bail within the Supreme Court, which will hopefully get listed in the next weeks or months in terms of this. And we're hopeful that at the very least Jaggi will get bail, and today's decision comes in very popular to that. Why I need to say thanks to the Sangat, because genuinely the legal team and myself, the family, we believe it's the Sangat's Ardasa that got this acquittal today. It was the Sangat's Ardasa that made the judge see the truth, that there was no evidence against Jaggi. Any other judge could have swayed the opposite way and put into the Indian government's rhetoric and convicted Jaggi. But it's Ardasa that's got Jaggi and it's his acquittal today. So it has been bittersweet because we were we wanted this result 7 years ago, but it's taken 7 years and 4 months. So as it stands, Jaggi has now been acquitted on 2 cases. He was acquitted on the Freed Court case, which charges were not framed back in 2018, and now the Baghapurana case, the initial case that Jaggi was abducted on. He's now been fully acquitted of all charges in respect of that case.
So obviously, the Indian government's not here to defend themselves, and they would maintain that. Well, they have maintained up until this point that Jagtar Singh is part of an international conspiracy, that the charges that he's being charged with relate to terror offenses, and they have consistently tried to paint a picture. If you look at the track record of what's been presented in the media of Jagtar Singh as someone they accused of radicalizing Sikh youngsters, they accused him of being involved in multiple conspiracies. How do you then account for or how do you see the delay? The 152 cases that were tried to, or the 152 Peshiyan, the hearings that it took to get to this point. Do you see them as being credible? Do you see them as evidence of due process, as we've heard, especially early on from UK politicians, that there should be due process, that they weren't willing to interfere in India's judicial process, they weren't willing to challenge India's sovereignty in this matter? How do you view that?
I think the element of it is the Indians have repeatedly said the law of the land will prevail, and the judicial system has prevailed. Unfortunately, it's taken 7 years and 4 months for us to get here. We've said this repeatedly, Shamsher Singh and others that have helped campaign for Jaggi to be released and brought back home. It's not the conviction that the Indians want, it's the delays. Jaggi spent 7 years and 4 months on this particular case in an Indian jail. That is his sentence. It's not the fact that the Indians want a conviction. That's the way the delay matters, and that's what's happened. Now, Jaggi was highlighting human rights violations before he went to jail, and today proves another human rights violation that's been taking place for minorities for umpteen years. So Jiggy's still focusing on his activism, and we're talking about it today again. People are talking about this. There hasn't been a due process, because if it was a due process, the case would have been tried much quicker. It would have been dealt with in an orderly fashion. It hasn't. The only reason we had the 152 Beishia trial hearings was because of the delays on the Indian prosecution. The alleged witness that the Indians relied on that was found not credible, at one point during the trial, they could not find him because they didn't know where he was. And then when they did bring him, the name on the statements and the name that he gave in court were two different names. That's the extent of it. And unfortunately, the Indian courts are looking at the low burden in order to charge, because they're saying this has to come out on trial. And as a result, there's delays. We've seen 7 years in forms for the Baghapurana case. Now, the NIA cases in Delhi, Jaggi's had 35 trial hearings in that case, and only 12 witnesses have been cross-examined in the 8 cases. If it's taken 7 years and 4 months in Punjab, which the hearings were taken relatively fast, how much longer would it take in Delhi? And that's how the Indian system works, and that's why there is no due process. Repeatedly, we've said this. It doesn't matter what the politicians say, there is no due process, and now they don't have an argument. The Foreign Secretary doesn't have an argument. The Prime Minister doesn't have an argument. Both whom have been lawyers. The Prime Minister has been a prosecutor. Will fully be appraised of double jeopardy and why it's applicable here. Now they can't hide behind due process and need to step up and use their political will.
So, one final question to you before we move on. Is this normal, what we're seeing? 152 trial hearings, years of detention that results in dismissal when the case is actually heard. Is this normal, or do you see any parallels that could be drawn to help the viewers understand the scale of what's happening here?
No, and in the Indian judicial system, and often I've said this on various interviews that I've done, one thing we always used to hear was "Tariq utte Tariq Pegi," and that's been evident in Jaggi's case. So, but what we've been able to do through the campaign, through Jaggi's plight, is document each peshi. Unfortunately, this happens to many minorities, including lots of Sikhs in Punjab. And if you remember, Shamsher saying there was a video Jaggi had said, and this was the first vocal video we got from him, in which he said, "What rights or what human rights do Sikhs have in Punjab?" So it's an element of it that there is, it's, for minorities, for Sikhs, this is what happens. But we've been able to highlight the flaws of the legal judicial system on a worldwide platform. But it is normal. This is what happens to other Nojwans, other Singhs and Singnia minorities that have to go through this whole procedure. I do want to say an element to this, Shamsher Singh. We've been fortunate. Maharaj has blessed us with the seva of what's happened, but at the same time, we've been able to afford the legal fees. There are many Nojwans that are sitting in jails that are not able to afford that. And the reason I say this is because we've just filed a Supreme Court bail appeal to the bails that were refused by Delhi High Court. It's 7 appeals that have been lodged. The appeal that we've lodged is going to go into thousands of pages. We had to get the whole charge sheets typed up in order to have it in a format, which is costing quite a bit of money to do. had to do everything in such a way that could have easily been done in a normal fashion, and it should have been accepted. But how does an arm banda do that? First, you've got your normal court, your district level, then you've got your high court fees, then going to the Supreme Court. And I spoke to this with many legal advocates, and they've said an arm banda can't go to court. And maybe this was the seva that we had to do, is highlight that this is the legal system within Punjab, within India, that's violating our human rights.
Thank you for that. Jazz Singh from the Sikh Federation. Obviously, this has been a big story that we've seen play out across the national media here in the UK. I think most major newspapers have covered it. What's been the reaction to the press coverage, this renewed interest in Jagtar's story? How have the politicians in the UK reacted to this, and what do you think? This renewed interest and this dropping of this such a significant case. What impact do you think it will have on Jaggi's ongoing arbitrary detention?
And Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. First of all, just want to thank all the Sangat, or all those that are watching on Sikh Channel today, and all of those that have been supportive since the 4th of November 2017. As Gurpreet said, it's been their support, their ardasa, that's given us all the strength to carry on. And it's with Guru Sahib's Kirpa that this morning, we were expecting positive news on Friday, but due to the due process in the court, it delayed it till today. But the news as it came through, it was one of hope, vindication, I think the biggest word, we always knew that Jaggi was innocent, but the time it had taken to get to this was just unbelievable. Everyone you met, in any occasion, it was like, oh my, the first thing is how long it's been now. People are forgetting it's been over 7 years. I think the biggest thing that we can take away from today's decision by the court is that after 7 years and 4 months, 152 court appearances, 55 witnesses, not a shred of evidence, not a single shred of evidence, not a single witness, not a single piece of recovery could be presented against Jaggi. And this is all after
But surely,
the DGP
Jazz Singh, but surely there must have been some evidence for this case to go on for 7 years. I mean, surely there must have been some kind of significant factors for Jagtar Singh to be detained in India for such a long period of time, for him to have so many court hearings. Are you saying that there was no evidence whatsoever?
Well, it's not me saying it, it's the Indian courts saying it. I think up until today, it was us saying it. As a campaign team, as a community, we were saying there was nothing against Jaggi. Today, the Indian judiciary have said there is nothing. If you read the papers that Manjpur Sahib has shared with us, it lists every single witness, 55 witnesses, all say there was nothing against Jagtar Singh Johal. Everything is named in the documents. And this is the Indian court saying we have no evidence, no witnesses, and no recovery again on these charges against Jagtar Singh Johal and all charges. And that's why he's been acquitted. And that's a huge vindication for those who were suspicious, and many were thinking it's been 7 years, he must have done something. That included our own community, that included the aspects of the media, and that included some politicians. And I think today's verdict, again, as I said, it vindicates the campaign team, vindicates the family, and vindicates all those Sikh activists that have campaigned it. And what it does do, it shines a light on the true motives. The true motives of this case were actually quite dark and sinister, and it was to target the voice of Sikh activism that was developing and growing in the UK. Jaggi is a UK national. He was very active in the UK, but not only Jaggi, all Sikh activists were very active since 2014 when we had the 30th anniversary of June 1984. We were garnering political support for our campaign, for the justice for 1984, and also for the Sikh struggle for freedom and autonomy. And that was getting mainstream public support. And this was an Indian strategy, particularly by Captain Arminder Singh, who was the chief minister, who said, right, I need to tackle this. And his way of tackling it was to send a message to silence Sikh activism. And his initial approach was using Jagtar Singh Johal. That's why he did the press conference with the DGP of police. These are the two most senior people in Punjab, one on national TV, and accused Jaggi of being a mastermind of killings. That's a huge claim to make on Indian national television. And it was only after that event that the campaign really went public. Before then, all the efforts were in the background. And not only did it stop there, I mean, to touch on a couple of things, after a year of painting Jaggi as a criminal mastermind, a financier of terrorism, etc., and claiming to have all the evidence under the sun, trying to convince the UK government of this, they tortured him. They made him sign blank confessions. They threatened his wife, his family. They played interrogation videos on Indian national television. Still, they had nothing. That they then stretched over to the UK and, using their influence, started to target Sikh activists in the UK. All of this was designed to spread fear in the youth and activists in the UK. They saw the support that actually everything they did just had an opposite effect, in that there's probably not a newspaper in mainstream media around the world that in the last 7 years has not run Jaggi's picture or an article, positive news statement. There's not a Naujawan or a Gurukar in the UK that is not aware of the Free Jaggi Now campaign and has not been either on a protest, a petition, or written to their MP. So everything they were doing to deter activism was actually going get back against them. And that's when they stepped it up to say, right, how do we scare these Sikhs in the UK? Well, let's land on their houses. Let's do dawn raids on their houses and let's see how they react to that. Again, that was designed to get evidence from abroad, and again, which is an illegal act, to use any information obtained under torture for any police investigation in this country is criminal offence. And they did that as they raided the 5 houses. They then continued to raid. They continued to censor on social media. They targeted Sikh organizations, our Gurdwara, and this sort of activity was all designed to defame the work of Jaggi and others, and also to put fear. All of that has been opened out now, and it's blown up in their face, because today's decision actually says that the Indian government genuinely had nothing. They falsely imprisoned him, arbitrarily detained, as you said, and now it's incumbent on the politicians. I mean, we've had this is the 5th prime minister since Jaggi's been abducted and detained, probably the 8th foreign secretary. Now it's up to them to not hide behind the so-called legal process and do everything within their power. Today's decision was momentous, as Godby said, and it was a great relief to have that case fully acquitted. But actually, it's now reinvigorated the campaign to now seek his full discharge and of all cases, and his release and return back to the UK. And that's our goal, and that's our political goal. And that's going to continue with the support. There's an ongoing petition, which I'll urge everyone to sign, because now's the time where we all have to step it up. It's not a case where we say, oh, right, Jaggi's been acquitted, we can all relax. No, now's the time you need to contact your MP and slap this judgment in front of them and say, this guy was tortured, he's a British national, he was physically tortured, he's been arbitrarily detained, no legal basis, and he's been acquitted of these.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So yes, great feedback and positive steps forward for the legal process today. A lot of campaigning happening from the legal team and a lot of hard work. I could see the relief of Gurpreet when he released that video today. You can see it. It's been a lot of blood, sweat and tears, and you could see he was drained and relieved after he's released that video. So well done, and continue to support the family from us as well. Just going on your question, Shamsher Singh. Look, be direct. There's always links. The court cases against us, myself, raids. They're all linked to Jaggi. Even on my indictment papers, in the legal court case, they had Jagtar Singh Johal's name. These raids were linked to put fear into the activists, to make us step back. And the main point of the raids, which everyone always misses, was to try and support India and substantiate claims that India have made on Jagtar Singh Johal. That's what these initial raids were. They were fishing exercises to substantiate claims on Jagtar Singh Johal. It was a failed counter-terror operation by the UK, who did a joint operation, and there is clear collusion. We know that because the UN have said it. The MI5, there was a public in 2022. The MI5 were exposed for passing and sharing intelligence. So we know there's ongoing sharing intel between the Indian government and the UK government back and forth. The raids, obviously, we know that people's names, Jaggi's names was on the indictments. They were looking for banned organizations in India and whatnot on the raids. There was Punjab officers down at the same time working with counter-terror and MI5 on the ground here under Operation Takuma. So those are direct links, what I would say, what I've seen within the campaign. And that's overall, I'm trying to sum it up very briefly. But yeah, that's my response to that. Yeah, there's definitely a direct link and sharing of intel between India and UK, not just solely on Jaggi's case, but on various operations and investigations.
And how does that make you feel as a Sikh activist in the UK that, as you're saying, that the Indian government and the British government are working hand in hand? And did you say that the MI5 were involved in handing information that led to Jaggi's arrest?
Yeah, I've not said that. That's been in the public domain for a while. But yeah, I'll reiterate that definitely MI5 have been involved in sharing intelligence. There was, and the Operation Takuma, Jagtar Singh Johal's name was on our indictment. So, the sharing of intel with governments. And
what's your view on, the collusion between the Indian government and the UK? Because that's quite a serious allegation, especially on one hand, we want politicians to urge Jagtar's release, but on the other hand, the establishment has potential links to handing Jaggi over to the Indian state. Is there a history
I
of
think
this?
it is. There is. Look, this history of Britain and India working together against Sikh activists isn't nothing new. It was very evident and very public from 1984. We've all seen the papers and the letters between Indira Gandhi and Margaret Thatcher and the Conservative government at that time, where there were direct demands to intern Sikh activists, effectively imprison them and shoot them at protests. These were specific written requests to the UK government at the time that we've all seen, and they're published in the Sacrificing Sikhs report. This isn't new. They targeted Sikhs in the 80s. There were entrapment cases, Asian provocateurs in the Rajiv Gandhi assassination claims, and many other false arrests and false convictions of Sikh activists. What was worrying with this recent trend of it is that how they knew that this was legal activity, the legal campaigning that Sikhs were doing. It wasn't anything that was underhanded. The armed struggle, if you can say, at that time had long been stopped. And this was a demonized attempt by the Indian government. And what's really worrying is that the Conservative government at the time actually accepted it. And not only did they accept it, they were complicit in it. And that is the most worrying thing, that our government, knowing full well the rights of its citizens, put them aside to please the Indian authorities, whether it was for the trade deal or whether it's for furthering relations, that they sacrificed the civil liberties and rights of British nationals en masse as a community. And this whole approach of the UK government, of the Conservative government in particular, was ramped up with the introduction of Priti Patel as the Home Secretary and Rishi Sunak as the Prime Minister, and they commissioned self saying we're working on tackling Sikh issues, whatever India would say, and behind the scenes, actually, it was even more sinister. They were misusing and abusing their powers, such as the Terrorism Act, Schedule 7 stops. Sikh activists today are still being stopped at airports under this conservative strategy to target Sikh activism. Gurukar today, up and down the UK, are being charged and investigated by the Charity Commission without any basis, all as part of this strategy to disrupt Sikh activism. And Sikh organizations continue to be demonized, targeted, blacklisted. And social media platforms, I'm sure every one of us on this panel are still banned in India on social media. Our pages are banned on most of the platforms. So this was all part of a well-planned, crafted political strategy at the highest level of UK government. That's what we're up against. And ultimately, this is now being unpicked and unraveled. Whilst governments will always maintain a relationship, and now we have a Labour government, but what we are seeing now is that actually there is a reversal from some of that mess that was created and that collusion. This will take time, but ultimately this will show true intention. Now, until Jaggi is returned, until these targeting of Sikh activists, organizations, and Gurdwara doesn't completely stop, we need to keep challenging it. But what we've gone through in the last 5 years in particular has been a very scary situation. And if we even bring it to not only the cases Deepa was talking about, the Sikh UC cases, the raids, but Avtar Singh Khanda, we lost one of our own. One of our own Sikh activists was killed in the UK, suspiciously, with the hand of the Indian government involved, which is the transnational repression activities we've been facing. Similarly, I'm sure Prabjot Singh will share stuff in the US and Canada in particular. But that's how far things got. And ultimately, it is now the Sangat and Maharaj that activism and Sikhi still goes. I mean, that's never going to stop, right? There's been a lot worse that's happened to our community. But I think it's a wake-up call for everybody that this is our duty. We're not doing this because we're related to Jaggi. I can say on this channel, I have never met Jaggi. We spoke on the phone, and that was inadvertently because it was related to the June rally. Jaggi used to bring the coach down, and we would exchange messages. I didn't know Gurpreet. Never met. Whatever happens to me happens. I need these guys.
Claims as many sects view in a completely different light. How do you view this relationship? And clearly, this whole issue seems to be much larger than Jagtar Singh Johal and much larger than one particular individual. How do you view this larger picture, and how do Sikhs actually view, what the Indian state is calling terrorism, the Khalistan struggle, and it's gone through various different phases from armed struggle to now it has taken a different form today, even though that there's continued clashes between Sikhs underground, and you're always reading news stories about incidences that are occurring in Punjab, and there's a long history here of the police's heavy-handedness and a long history of documented human rights violations that were carried out by the Indian state to target Sikh civilians in order to suppress the movement for Khalistan, something that is well known about Jagtar Singh Johal himself. This is what he was doing. This is why many Sikhs say he was in the radar of the Indian state, because he was documenting this history of resistance and this history of crimes that the Indian state was committing against the Sikh people. So how do you view this whole saga?
Yeah, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I think one key term that is being brought up again and again is vindication. Like when Justin Trudeau got up and said India was involved in killing a Canadian citizen. It's what the Sikh Panth has been saying for decades. It's something we know. And for the chief minister of Punjab at the time of Jaggi's arrest to say, we have sufficient evidence, this guy's going to be locked up. And for now, 7 years later, for him to be acquitted of all charges, all witnesses being false or propped up, I think again is vindication. What I would caution is for the Sikh month is typically what happens is when we get some good news, we tend to kind of let off the reins a little bit. We saw this in the farmers' protest when the laws were repealed. There were some voices like Deep Sidhu saying, "This is not the end of the struggle," but some people were busy in celebration. So while this acquittal has brought us some vindication and kind of reiterated what we've been saying for decades, I think it's important to understand with clarity that all of this is done to suppress the call for Khalistan. Whether it's through Jaggi, whether it's through transnational repression, whether it's through lying on press conferences to fabricate cases, all of this is to suppress the Sikh call for freedom. And it's something that is not a mystery. It's not confusing as to why they would do it. India wants full and complete control over what they claim is theirs. We consider Punjab to be occupied territory. And anyone like Jaggi, like Avtar Singh Khanda, like Hardeep Singh Ninjar, Pai Panjwad, Deep Sidhu, all these people that are speaking against it are radars, and I including everyone on this panel. If we are speaking so clearly and overtly about the tactics that India uses to suppress Sikh voices, and we are also targets. But this is something I think the overall umbrella picture, and I'll end with this, is the arrest of Jaggi was there to send a message. It was to scare activists outside in international countries. And I think quite the opposite has happened. Like Jaz Singh mentioned, through Jaggi's legal assistance, charity that they've started, they've released 70 plus people. Now, those are 70 plus people that would have remained in jail had Jaggi not been arrested. So while they arrested one Jaggi and now have embarrassed themselves on an international stage, they've released 70 other people that they had locked up in their jails. So at the end of the day, the Khalsa Panth is always in Chardi Kala. Today's acquittal has further reinforced that, but good or bad is really how we view it. If he's been in jail for 7 years, and I think the amount of attention that he's garnered and the amount of clarity that he's provided within the Sikh month is priceless, and we thank him for his sacrifice. We are thankful to all the Sangat who has campaigned, including us. Like Jai Singh said, I've never met Jagtar Singh, and however, we consider our Panth to be our family, and we will continue to keep up this pressure. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Gurji ki Fateh. Thank you so much, Viji. Jasveer Singh, in your work with the Sikh Press Association, you must come across many different types of Sikhs and many different types of organizations and speak to a huge cross section of the Sikh community. In your opinion, why does this issue of Jagtar Singh matter so much, and why does it so clearly resonate with Sikhs across not only the UK but across the entire diaspora? And you hear from the Indian government continually that there's a small minority of Sikhs that are incredibly vocal, that support Khalistan, that this isn't actually an issue that concerns all Sikhs, that the majority of Sikhs don't care about this. We're dealing purely with a criminal case. Do you find that to be true? What do you think Sikhs think about this issue, and why should Sikhs be concerned about not only Jagtar Singh but also, many other Sikh prisoners and larger political questions?
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thanks for having me on, guys. And also thanks to the Six channel for not only platforming us, but persevering when we had technical issues at the start and making sure that I could log on. And regarding your question, Shamsher Singh, I think regardless of what the Indian state says, if we look at the grassroots realities of the Sikh communities across the globe, what we will see is clear evidence for mass support for Jagtar Singh Johal across a spectrum of different types of Sikh communities and groups, we can evidence protests and support campaigns for Jaggi in Malaysia, in Holland, and of course in the USA, in Canada, and the UK. We've even seen times where Sikhs have gone to some of the biggest sporting events in the world, basketball matches, football matches, and at these occasions where there's cameras where millions will be watching, the Sangat, the Sikh congregation, have thought upon themselves, what's the best thing I can do here? And they're carrying signs which say free Jaggi now at these events. That shows how important this situation is to the Sikh community, and why it is so important is because it reflects a modern example of a reality the Sikh community has faced for decades, before I was born, before you were born, before many of us as panelists were born, many of our parents even. And that's the issue of the Sikh political prisoners, those that are speaking up against state injustices, have long been persecuted. And this is something that my generation, maybe we only heard about it. In some ways, it took a kind of a mythological form as a narrative. We heard these stories about these political prisoners. We heard these stories about the great injustices and people spending over decades in some situations in prison based on completely fabricated charges. And what Jagtar Singh Johal represents is an example of that. We've seen this play out now in real time before our eyes, exactly the way we've always heard about. And that's why this case is so important to us. That's why there's groups, again, from Malaysia to Germany to Canada to Australia that have been campaigning for Jagtar Singh Johal. And let's remember, they've been doing that for 7 years now. This isn't something that is like a flash in the pan where groups have just been inspired because of a brief moment. This is something that communities have stayed on top of for coming up to 8 years now. So it's a really important situation for the Sikh community. There's a couple of other points I'd like to expand on, if that's all right, Shamsher Singh.
Yeah, sure. I think we're wrapping up as well. We're running out of time. I think the show needs to conclude by tonight. I really want to go back to Gurpreet Singh as well. So if you sure, just take a few seconds to wrap up.
Yeah, of course. So a couple of a very important thing actually to note right now is that amidst this media storm, we've seen coverage from pretty much every UK mainstream media outlet on this news about Jagtar Singh Johal, about the Free Jaggi Now campaign. There will be global follow-ups. I'm sure the likes of Washington Post, which have covered this, will be following up and so forth. It's important for us to recognize that the Indian state themselves are yet to speak on the issue. They are remaining silent. We're coming up to approximately 24 hours since this news has broke. I know for a fact that media outlets have approached, whether it be their local Indian consulate or it be their own contacts that they've gained through the Indian government or in Indian media, in fact, or even within the Punjab police. And we are seeing nothing said about this situation. And I think that is quite telling, because let's remember when the process started, it started with a press conference. It didn't start with a court hearing as you would expect in a judicial process. It started with a press conference by the then Chief Minister of Punjab, Captain Amarinder, who literally used the word solved. He said certain cases of criminality, of accusations of terrorism across Punjab, they have now been solved with the arrest of Jagtar Singh Johal. And nearly 8 years later, we've seen that not only not come to fruition, but the Indian state as a whole now just, I guess, want to bury their heads in the sand about it and ignore it. So that's something very important to remember. And beyond that, I just wanted to kind of add and open up to the panelists. What do we think this means for the Sikh community? I've talked about how important this is for Sikh communities across the world. What does this moment mean for us? And also, I'd like to hear from Gurpreet too about how did you maintain your preparation for over 7 years, 145 plus cases? How did you guys maintain your preparation through all of that process, where you could so efficiently present your case just within 5 hearings to a point where you got acquitted just after those 5 hearings? What did it take to get to that point? Thanks for the time, guys. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
That's a great question, Jazz. I think Gurpreet Singh, I don't know if you heard that, but Jazz was asking what did it take in terms of preparation for the legal team to present a case that just after 5 hearings was able to destroy this? What did that preparation look like?
So it's a good question in respect of it. What's happened the day Jaggi was charged on these offences? We knew what the strategy was at that point in order to put in front of the lawyers, sorry, in front of the judicial system. It took that whole time, but Jaspal Singh Manjpur, and I need to really thank him because he really cares about any case he takes on. He read that case inside out. We would have daily talks. We still have daily talks. Even up until the night before of any proceedings, we have talks. And he is a lawyer, and the first lawyer that I've met in India that's actually willing to listen to myself and my views and his views, and sometimes they match, sometimes they don't match, and then takes that forward. Whereas other lawyers just say, well, if you don't like it, go elsewhere. But Jaspal Singh was on top of it. Every single witness, every single paper he had read. And that's what made it easy because he was in there reading the statements, cross examining any witness that was being put forward. The hardest part, and I'm genuinely being honest, Friday night when we fought, sorry, Thursday night when we thought the decision was going to be coming on Friday past, 7 years flashed in front. What happens now? How does this happen? And I didn't understand up until then the turmoil that's been on the family, etc. So it's not been easy preparing. There was, and I'm being a solicitor here, is there's 99.9% that we were confident that Jaggi was going to be acquitted, but there's that 0.01% where Indian government influence could have swayed it anyway. So it's been difficult in terms of it. But what allowed Advocate Manjpur to present the case in an ordinary fashion, to present that there's nothing against him, is that he had read the papers inside out. And he would discuss them. He had made tables, charts of how do we cross-examine each witness and how do we break the evidence of it based on the statements that they provided. That's what the preparation was in respect of this. I owe a lot of credit to Jaspal Singh Manjpur with the way he's handled this case, the way he's handled the family, speaking to myself every day, speaking to Jaggi's wife, Jaggi's father-in-law, in respect of it. And not just that, he's been taking calls from the Sangat throughout the whole last 7 years and 4 months in terms of keeping them updated in respect of it. And this bit I'm going to say in Punjabi, both of us were relieved when we got that decision, which was Maharaj ne sadi donari laaj rakh li. Every single time I would get questioned, which was, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਵਕੀਲ ਕੁਛ ਕਰਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ, ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਹੋਰ ਕੋਈ ਵਕੀਲ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਵਾ, ਪਰਿਵਾਰ ਨੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਿਉਂ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਵਾ? And Paji used to get questioned, Jaggi's only in jail because Paji's just trying to get his pounds. That's all he's worried about, his fees. That wasn't the case. It was about the trust. It was about the understanding. Some comments came out was if it was a decent lawyer, then he would be able to evidence the prolonged delays. Now, what do you do when the NIA don't produce, sorry, the Punjab Police or NIA don't produce the witnesses? The judge has to give an alternative date. There's nothing the defence can do. The defence only got the opportunity, and when they did, they presented it fully. And look, we've got the fruit of that, and Jaggi has been acquitted. So again, I think there's a lot of praise to the Sangat. Maharaj ne kirpa karke, we got a good lawyer who really fought to get Jaggi out. And that's what's happened, and that's why we've got the fruits of this. So it's thanks to the Sangat and the Ardasa, because without it, both myself and Paji Manjpur would not have the energy to keep going. Counting sorry, I need to say this point. 152 Peshia, and Paji was at every single Peshi. Other Peshia, that could have been easily been 300 because Paji wasn't going to be attendance, but there was always representation. So I'm grateful for the Sangat for the continued support, and it's not over, like Prabjot Singh said. This is a stepping stone. Now we need to put the pressure on the government. to bring Jaggi back home. There's a parliamentary petition for anyone residing in UK. We need your signatures on them to push the UK government to take the political will to bring Jaggi back home. Sorry, Shamsher Singh, I went over a bit there.
No, that's absolutely fine. I've heard you speak so many times about the support that you've gotten from the Sangat, from the Sikh community, the support that you've got from, your legal team in Punjab, and, other Sikhs that have supported you in the campaign. I haven't heard you speak about the support that you've received from the British government, though, or from consular services. Have you felt supported by the British government in all of this? And especially given the fact that there's allegations that the MI5 was involved directly in giving information. I think the organization Reprieve broke that story, about a year and a half or 2 years ago, where they said that there was credible links to MI5 having given information that directly, an intelligence tip-off is what they called it, that led to Jaggi's arrest. How do you kind of deal with this? It seems like a really difficult position to be in, because on one hand, you need the government to step up and call for Jagtar's release, and put pressure on the Indian government, but then also you see the same government being involved in not only handing Jaggi over, but also targeting the campaign over here in the UK. How do you kind of deal with this really difficult position?
I think the element of that is the previous government did not help us at all. And they really tried to suppress us on each opportunity given. September 2018, it's that kind of extent. That's when raids happened, Five Singhs raided because the Indians needed evidence against Jaggi because they can't find it. To date, they're still on a fishing expedition. We've seen that with Deepa Singh's trial. That's all they've been trying to do, is trying to get evidence against Jaggi. So it has been hard. We've maintained a professional and positive attitude towards the whole element of it. With the new government, the difference has been that David Lammy became the Foreign Secretary in July. He raised Jaggi's case at the first opportunity. And that's taking it right at the top of the agenda. So it's a new government. Then when I had the meeting with David Lammy, it was a different meeting from the previous foreign secretaries, where Reprieve were in the room. There was a strategy that was discussed, and I agree. We should not have to go to the government to say, how do you bring Jaggi back? It should be the government telling us how to do it. But myself and Reprieve have went and gave a strategy of how you bring Jaggi back to the UK. So now time will tell. The big achievement that we needed is happened today. Now the next steps are going to be the doors open, and we'll be discussing further. Obviously, we can't discuss the strategy in respect openly about it, but those steps will now be taken to have a meeting with them, and we will see what the political will of the UK government is to bring Jaggi back home, because the UK government, the new government, is showing power and they're showing leadership. Now we'll see if they'll protect their own British citizen and bring Jaggi back home, because if they don't, Shamsher Singh, Jaggi could be in there for decades as a result of this double jeopardy element. And if we're saying that we respect international law, etc., double jeopardy is enshrined internationally, and that's the fact. That is where we're at with things. So hopefully within the next few months, Jaggi should be out on bail, and in the meantime, we'll be looking at pushing the legal avenue aspect of quashing the 8 NIA cases based on today's decision. But at the same time, this is where Hath Jod ke benti hai to the Sangat, that the pressure has now reignited the campaign with Jaggi's decision, with the outcome today, and we push up the pressure on the government to bring Jaggi back. We've talked about this so many times, and I've said this to the government so many times. If they want, they could bring Jaggi back tomorrow. And that's the power that the government still do have. Now they can't hide behind that we have all this evidence against Jaggi, he's a terror suspect, etc. We now have evidence from an independent judiciary system who has found Jaggi acquitted of all charges. The UAPA charges have all, he's been convicted of everything that they had thrown at him. So I think that's the element of it. That's why this is just the starting point of bringing Jaggi back home. The more support we have, the more Sangat that help us with this. That petition is an easy way of doing it, and we can hopefully, we're in March, Maharaj Kirpa Kare, maybe we might see Jaggi at the next June rally. We can only do Ardas in front of Maharaj, and Maharaj has listened to us so far. Orekar, the area and the Erni, and that's the hope that we take, and that's the Retna we take from Maharaj and the Sangat.
Shamsher, if I may just add, because we were on a call earlier this evening with Jaspal Singh Manjpur Paji, and again, just to reiterate what Gurpreet said, because it's important that on today's show we cover a lot of things. Throughout these 7 years, a lot of questions have been asked from Sangat or certain aspects of the Sangat, and not everything we could publicly come out and say, because either it was a certain strategy or it would be detrimental to how the Indian would react. But a lot has happened in 7 years that even just 2 hours of this show won't cover. Whether it was the protest we first did outside the Foreign Office and them accepting Jaggi had been tortured, whether it was Rory Stewart, the Foreign Office Minister, who stood in Parliament, and it's available to this date, that said if Jaggi, a British national, had been tortured, the government would take extreme action against the Indians. These things have been said in Parliament. Prime Ministers have raised Jaggi's issue. So for Jaspal Singh Manjpur, that's been the one constant, and with the family, is that day and night he's been campaigning and working on this case. And as Gurpreet said, he wasn't just fighting the case against the prosecution. He was fighting a case against the whole Indian system, politically and judicially. And he even said that he would have arguments with lawyers that he knew from college and training in university. But they were saying, look, we know you're right, but our hands are tied. You know there are bigger forces behind us and we have to take certain actions. And so this is a Gorsek, pretty much one-man band that's took on the Indian government and its full resources and defeated them in this case. And that is testament to his hard work and the Kirpa. And not only was he fighting this case, he himself was subjected to NIA cases. So he himself, not only is he supporting Jaggi, Bagga Shera, even Jagtar Singh Hawara's cases, but many hundreds of other cases of Sikh activists. Whilst doing that, he was then targeted of the Indian system, and he was charged under these cases, and he had to get himself acquitted. And it was only due to the support of the whole bar council that when he was arrested, they turned up outside court and Manjpur Paji was released. Otherwise, he would have been another statistics, just like Jaswant Singh Kalra and another human rights activist that was potentially eliminated. And it's important that we share that, because a lot of Sangat said that had we not made Jaggi so famous and the campaign got so public, he would have been out. And we can share these things today, but if we had not have raised the case of Jagtar Singh Johal, that it was highly likely and highly probable that he would also have been a statistic, because he was too hot for the Indian policing system to hold. They would have made some excuse and he would have been eliminated. There is sufficient evidence to support that. So these things all now come to light, that we can share some of these things. But to really amplify it, the investigating officer who tortured Jaggi, Rajit, SP, he was the one who went publicly and said he's the mastermind with Dinkar Gupta and Suresh Arora, the DGP. Rajit now himself is on the run. He is now wanted by the same system for major drug scandals and is on the run. So the leading investigator in this case is corrupt, is known now as a corrupt officer, and that whole system is corrupt and is now in on the run from the Indian state. And it just shows you that actually how immoral and corrupt that system was, which Jaggi's had to go through the long way round. So all I want to say is that huge thank you to Manjpat Baji, huge thank you to the media, who everyone's covered this, especially Kirsten Patterson and Katie Hunter from BBC Scotland and The Times, to Martin Dr. Hughes, who was Jaggi's original MP, and again, being from Scotland and non-Sikh, has been at every event we've invited him to, every Gurdwara event, champion Jaggi's cause like a true MP should, disregarding any party politics. Preet also, Corgill, who led this case. So we've had huge support, and Reprieve taking it up to the UN and supporting with legal challenges. But most importantly, the Sangat, because ultimately this is the result of their campaigning and their support. And it just shows you it might take more time, it might take us decades and years, but ultimately, Fateh Hundiya Sangadi when you have true belief and you're dedicated. And I think this is an example. And I think just Veer Singh said what is different about Jaggi's case, and I think is that it epitomizes the struggle in recent times, that we've had to struggle, even though there was no evidence, there was no legal basis. Still, the doubters were there. We've had to challenge the doubters. We've had to fight the systems. We've had to fight governments, fight a media war. But ultimately, Maharaj ne jit prapat ki tiya, and we've been successful and fateh in that. And that comes down to the belief and the support of the Sangat. So again, a huge thank you to everybody.
You know, I'm sure many Sikhs share the sentiments that you've expressed, but you know what we're looking at here is 7 years, close to 8 years of a young man's life, where he spent 8 years away from his wife, from his newlywed wife. He spent 8 years coming up to away from his family, from his loved ones, from his work. And in a case that has been is dragged on. I personally am struggling, you know, after, you know, this whole conversation of seeing any measure of justice in this, or any kind of effectiveness of process. As Gurpreet mentioned, you know, there has been no due process in this. What is the message that Sikh youngsters, this future generation, should be taking away from this whole situation? And Deepa, I'd come to you first, and then perhaps we can wrap up the call, because I'm conscious of the time as well. I think we've got about 5-7 minutes left.
So just repeat the question again, Shamsher.
I don't see this as being justice. I think it could be. We're looking at 8 years of someone's life, close enough to 8 years of Jaggi's life. He was a young guy when he went into prison. He's had a whole lot taken away from him, and you know, yes, the cases have been dropped, but he should never have been in the first place. So how should Sikh Naujawan, how should Sikh youngsters look at this situation? What do we need to learn from this situation? What do we need to have in our mind about what is actually happening?
Look, everyone's here for the good days, but the bad days, when Gurpreet was up at 2 a.m. ringing me in the morning, waking me up to strategize, people won't remember the campaigning, you know, that whole process just to support somebody they don't know. You know, it took a lot for us to get the Sangat on board anyway. And like today is some kind of relief, I would say, for the Sangat. But bear in mind what you're saying, somebody's well-being, somebody's wife's well-being, how to manage that is completely different. And like living that is one of those most difficult things. Like if you look in history, in Sikh Itihas, the struggles we've had against oppressive governments who have suppressed us, who have shut down our freedom of speech, that all these tyrant governments and tyrant regimes and these failed operations, they always continue to try and suppress us because our voice is quite powerful when one of us speaks. And Jaggi, even that little clip of him coming out showed his well-being. He said it, he took it on the chin at that time, and he said, there's no justice here. So if he's saying there's no rights for Sikhs in India, while he's there in a court van, like that's the be all and end all of what your question is. He said it himself that there is no due process there while he's there. He knows that. He knew for 7 years, 8 years, this is going to be kicked into the long grass for, and some of us will be predicting about 8 to 10 years and things like that before they even see him. So, being in that situation, what we need to do as Najwan is wake up, yeah, understand the dynamics, the methods, the tactics, and the patterns being used. You brought up Prevent earlier. In UK, our Najwan need to wake up. Prevent will be used in different tactics to disrupt Sikh activism. And we need to step it up, get together. If we look at the recent Slough case, when the Charity Commission is being used to target the Khalistan banners, there's CPAs on the call, and just reads organizations being targeted. Shamshir, you realized early on as well, while you were running an SYF, our community needs to wake up. It's not as simple as just putting a post out and thinking life's simple for people. People have struggles, and as a community, we need to, round up, rally up, and get supporting each other. That's the main thing. Understanding these things is the priority, and that comes down to our pajalics. And if our pajalics don't understand what's going on to us, and it's going to be left to the same 5-6 activists, then we're failing as a community. So, really and truly, our pajalics, all these Vadyale, Guru cards, need to be understanding what's happening in activism, what's happening, and the tactics being used by foreign governments and our own governments to suppress our voices.
Thank you so much. And just finally, Jazz, before we go on to Gurpreet for some last words, given this whole environment of transnational repression that we've been seeing, where it looks quite clearly like India has stepped up its game, and they've begun targeting Sikhs in Canada and in the UK. You mentioned Jagtar Singh Khanda, who was, many Sikhs say he was, died in very mysterious circumstances. What do you see as the future implications of where we are now? Where does this go, and what is it that Sikhs should have in their mind, as Deepa Singh was saying?
I think we are a certain crossroads, you could say, in that we've gone through a very difficult time politically in this country. A lot of people were affected. They were nervous, and we saw that on the ground. And we're now where the political landscape is changing globally. We saw Justin Trudeau stand up in Parliament calling India out. We saw the US government react. Charges were filed against certain individuals. But since then, we've seen an administration change in the US. Now, the Trump effect, it's unclear which way that will go. We were talking with some Canadian Singhs earlier this week. And with a pending election in Canada, the Trump administration effect, how long this transnational repression global impact will continue, time will tell. But it's doing one thing. It's given impetus to the community, back to the community, that yes, again, that we're showing that vindication, that justification, that the struggle will continue, politics will change, people will come and go. What's important for a lot of the viewers of C Channel today is how we engage with the UK government. Because of what we've seen, right from the 80s to the Conservative government that was largely responsible for the prolonged detention of Jaggi, to now this Labour government, that they need to differentiate themselves, and they have the power to do so. As Gurpreet said, they can bring Jaggi home tomorrow if they had the political will. Now, the political will is driven by pressure, political pressure. Today is being wall to wall. So for the first day since the 4th of November that I can't keep up with the media reporting on Jaggi's acquittal. But the media is playing its part. The Sangat need to continue playing their part. Now, we need to create political pressure to force politicians. No one's going to go and do it themselves. Let's not be under any illusions that even though we've got now 12 Sikh MPs, that tomorrow they're going to feel it within their heart to do their duty. One or two will. The rest will be based on what reaction their constituents and what pressure they put on and the local Gurdwara put on. And that's incumbent on all of us and everyone watching, whether you're a Pravandak in a Gurdwara, whether you're just a constituent, write to your MP today. We'll try and get a letter template done in the next 24 hours for people to write to it. As Gurpreet said, there's an ongoing petition. But take that. If we can't even take 5 minutes of our time to write a letter to an MP calling for Jaggi's immediate release, showing the link, attach any article you want from today, and ask your MP to raise this issue and secure Jaggi's release, then really what are we doing? So that's how simple this pressure and this activism can be. We can all do it. So I think if we all play a role, then we have a good chance of bringing Jaggi home sooner rather than later. And then the political dynamic that will be in our favor as a community, because the more of these cases we win, the more that it shows that we are being suppressed, we are being discriminated against. And in the long run, the struggle will continue. We'll continue to fight. And it just shows that these are just points in our journey that give us momentum and give us strength, but the struggle continues until we're free and we have our own Sikh homeland and Khalistan is established. But this is just our journey that we all need to take.
Thank you so much. And finally, very briefly, Gurpreet Singh, what's next from the campaign, and what is the message you'd like to leave the Sangat with from the campaign?
Thank you, Shamshi Singh. I think we've got the parliamentary petition that Benti is for the Sangat to sign and spread out, because we've each got 5-6 members in our households that we can sign. The more numbers we have, the more pressure we put on the UK government in order to bring Jaggi back. But the campaign's not stopped today. It still continues until Jaggi is back home in terms of this. So we'll continue. I'm 110% sure the Sangat has supported me to date, supported Jaggi to date. Jaggi was thankful, Jaggi's wife was thankful for everything that the Sangat do with Maharaj's Kirpa, and we will bring him back. So basically is this, keep spreading the word about Jaggi and raise the issues with your MP, because now there's nothing that they can hide behind. We have an acquittal from a judicial system, and we can also say it's taken 7 years and 4 months for this acquittal to take place, and as a result you need to bring him back home as soon as possible. But sab to badi cheez hai, Maharaj de bharosa rakho, bani paro, and keep. That's where the hope is. That's where we're getting our energy from, and that's why we've not been demoralized today, because the Sangat have kept each other together. So it's the Radasa of the Sangat that's brought us to this stage. Jaz Singh said earlier on that people have said we shouldn't have made a big noise about Jaggi and you should have done it on the down low. Jaggi would have been dead today. If it wasn't for the Radasa of the Sangat, if we hadn't raised the Free Jaggi Now campaign when we did, I'm his own brother, I'm saying that he would not be here. Because Jaggi the Indian government tried to silence Jaggi. They tried to silence him on the 4th of November 2017, the 7th of November 2017, May 2019, moving him from Punjab to Delhi. But all he's done is continued through his imprisonment to talk about the human rights violations that take place. You've heard about Sikh Legal Assistance Board that formed as a result of Jaggi saying, "You're doing my cases, what about the thousands that are sitting here with nothing?" We've got over 100 people out as a result of it. And those Ardasa from those parwars are also going to Jaggi. Ardasa going to the family. So it's Maharaj's Kirpa Ajay tak pahunche. And I can only say thank you to Maharaj for the seva. He blessed the family, not just Jaggi, but gave Das the seva as well, of being able to talk about the human rights violations that have been taken against us.
Thank you all so much for your time. And if you want to find updates about Jaggi's case, you can visit the Free Jaggi Now handle on social media. Thank you all so much for the work that you've done and for taking the time out this evening. And thank you so much to the Sikh Channel team to put together this special update show. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.